This workshop to order. This is a regular workshop of the Board of County Commissioners for Monday, June 27th. Today we're going to talk about resiliency, and I'll ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
This is a public workshop of the Citrus County Board of County Commissioners this 27th day of June 2022. In attendance are Chairman Ronald E. Kitchen Jr., First Vice Chair Ruthie Schleybaugh, Second Vice Chair Holly Davis, Commissioner Scott Carnahan and Jeff Kennard, and County Attorney Denise A. Diamond-Lynn. Department of Management and Budget Director Colleen Scott.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this time, is there any one from the public that wishes to speak to the board at this time? Any public input? Okay, we'll move on past the public input. We'll move to the resiliency workshop. Ms. Scott, you want me to do the introductions, or do you want to do it, or how do you want to do this? You want me to do it? Okay. So, as you'll probably see, this is not Sean Sullivan sitting in the office here, who is scheduled to be here today from the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. He could not make it, but we have the very, very efficient and professional C.J. Reynolds here today. I've worked with C.J. for a few years now down at the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, so she's going to give us a presentation on resiliency. This was one of the items discussed at our retreat that we thought was an important subject to address for Citrus County. So she's here to tell us what the TBRPC is doing about that, how it affects Citrus County, and then to answer any questions the commissioners may have on it. So CJ, welcome. Glad to see you, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Kitchen, and good morning, all the commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here. It was a beautiful drive up, so thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm happy to give an overview of a lot of the different resiliency initiatives. I'm the Director of Resiliency and Engagement, and I work with all of our member counties, and additionally the coalition member county, Sarasota, as well as cities. So I'm going to give an overview of some of the key topics that we're working on, specifically some of the programs that are pertinent to Sarasota County and some of the resources that we have that can support staff and other nonprofits and other folks working on both short-term disasters from floods and hurricanes as well as longer-term planning. So thank you, and I appreciate it. Now let's go next. So as many of you may know, the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council works across multiple jurisdictions. We have the following counties, and you guys are the northernest of that. And so we do a lot of work with this multi-jurisdictional initiatives, as well as the cities, and the board convenes regularly, meeting about 10 times a year, which Commissioner Kitchen so generously drives down for and makes those meetings. We really appreciate that direct input. Without it, it would not be possible to do the things that we're doing. So next screen, please. So I'm going to give you just this one slide, which is an overview of our emergency management initiatives. A lot of this is really supporting hurricane preparedness, and I know everyone has really strong emergency management teams, post-disaster, pre-disaster planning. We work and produce the disaster planning guide. We have also worked with your local mitigation strategy team and helping to do your update, and that LMS is a required document that identifies the different kinds of risks and your preparedness approaches for them, and includes other things. And so we have a variety of other ongoing initiatives regarding regular meetings, the local emergency management planning committee, first responder training, hazard analysis, and other documents and materials. And so there's other staffers who work on these initiatives on a regular basis. And we engage your team members and your staff in those projects. So next screen, please. So today what I'm going to do is cover a variety of the resiliency initiatives. And resiliency is really the long-term planning related to, in this case, different kinds of flood hazards, and also heat and potentially drought. We haven't gotten into that, but mostly the work has been focused on resiliency for drought, for flooding. And so I'm going to give you an overview of some of the meetings we've had with the state, looking at the proposals we're working on for you, other initiatives and data resources. And this was just kind of a list of a lot of the projects, so I stay on track for that. And I do welcome questions at any point in time. So next screen, please. So Sean has been very active, and I know he wished he could be here to present to you. We've had a lot of meetings with different state directors and divisions on resiliency, and the state has become much more active under the governor within the last year. There's a lot more funding. The departments have high-level goals and initiatives which they are going to be working on, including the Florida Department of Transportation itself has to develop a vulnerability assessment for roads going forward. So Sean has been very active in meeting with that. I also coordinated some meetings with the new FDP Chief Resiliency Officer and around the state, and he made various stops. He was primarily focused on where funding had been initiated and provided. So it was a good way to get his perspective on what their priorities are and make sure that we're doing work that is aligned with their goals so we can continue the great work and continue to bring in funding for our members. So next screen, please. So one of the primary reasons I know that there was some interest in this is that the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council has developed a proposal, submitted it to the FDEP. It's called the Resilient Florida Program. All of the state counties and cities are being asked to submit a proposal for conducting vulnerability assessments of critical infrastructure and public assets. And in the state legislature, a year and a half ago by now, they defined what are the categories of critical infrastructure, all the way starting from roads and bridges in Category 1 to municipal operations and treatment facilities, critical emergency and community facilities, and then natural resources. So there's these 4 defined categories in the statute. Excuse me. And so the state has been issuing grant funding to conduct vulnerability assessments to help cities and counties identify where are you most vulnerable. And they have identified or set forth a specific set of criteria that each local government needs to look at. They're trying to get consistency between cities to cities, cities to counties, and so they have defined what that criteria is. We submitted a proposal on your behalf in collaboration with you all. This will be announced later this summer, earlier this fall by September. The Regional Planning Council would be project management lead, and there's budget for a subcontracted engineering services firm to help conduct the work that needs to be done. The benefit of this is that it provides a detailed level of mapping and analysis and data. So it takes your existing, where are your buildings, what's their exposure to different kinds of things. And certainly your team has looked at this in the past, but this is now to the state-specific criteria, looking at 2040 and 2070. They're different scenarios, incorporating what they call compound flood events, which is when you got a storm, plus high tide, plus extreme rain, and so all of the different permutations of possible flooding, which could be both inland as well as coastal. And so this is going to produce some really useful information, excuse me, for your facilities, your operations team, to really help you with, or help the team to further identify where are the needs for resiliency improvements. What does that mean? What's at risk from different kinds of flooding? How frequently might it happen? What do we have to do with the people who either work or live? How are the extended impacts? So a vulnerability assessment will help you all, and I'm sure there'll be lots of different presentations if this is awarded, multiple levels of things, and you guys will get a lot of great detail from it and mapping. One of the most significant reasons to do this vulnerability assessment is the state has indicated that it's required by the state to get this information, and secondarily that to ensure that they have the information to comply with the statute, that cities and counties that do not conduct vulnerability assessments will in the future in 2025 not be eligible to apply for critical infrastructure improvement projects. So they want to know that you know what's going to go wrong before you say, here's how we're going to fix it. So it makes sense to do this now, and we were happy to submit this for you. So I know it's a bit of a wonky thing, but I just wanted to give you the overview and see if you had any questions on the vulnerability assessment before I went into some of the broader things.
Any questions so far, anybody? No. Okay, thank you, man.
Great. Next screen, please, sorry. So one of the exciting things that we're working on is to really look at how do we create and support resilient communities. And for those of the communities that are on the coastlines, what we've been doing for the past several years is really looking at, thank you so much, the fact that modern shoreline resilience and flood protection strategies are really gaining traction. Things are changing. And the Army Corps is changing ways that they're doing things. And what we're seeing is more and more using a range of engineered techniques and materials. So there's this chart here kind of shows you, it's small charts, but a continuum of how things can be used at a shoreline. And what we've seen over the last number of years is that the federal agencies are themselves requiring and funding more innovative infrastructure improvement projects. And so we study these things closely, and as part of the coalition, we've had a lot of questions with the federal agencies, with the state agencies who are also looking at these programs, with our, some of the larger counties who are working to apply for these large grants, really large infrastructure grants. And so we're identifying how can we strengthen what these things are. So we're taking a lot of look at that and gaining more insight. And part of our coalition members are, we bring together the engineering teams, the architecture, coastal engineers, all kinds of folks to go through what is it that's changing? How can we look at this? And then that can trickle up or down into capital improvement for design projects for capital improvement. Next screen, please.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What is beach nourishment?
Beach nourishment. So what is happening over time is that the wave changing patterns erodes the shorelines.
Is it just adding sand?
That is the case in the past. So now they're having to look at additional types of engineered structures underneath the sand. So you can keep bringing the sand back, but the waves and the storms will keep taking it away. And so,
Yeah, so I figured it had to be something more than just adding sand, but the picture just shows sand, so I was kind of wondering what the deeper meaning of that was.
yes,
Anyway,
yeah.
thank you.
So a lot of times there's, there's berms built underneath the sand. A lot of, the engineered solutions is really what we're talking about. On the surface, it may look completely natural, but it's not anymore. So that's a good question. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Spudbar.
Good morning.
Good morning.
She brought up a question for me. Growing up in Sarasota, Siesta Key, our beach was never as long as it is now. So we had a beach nourishment. They brought in sand. It seems like the same soft, sugar sand we've always had, but the beach is tremendously bigger. Is that on purpose? Was that because of the nourishment? How does something like that happen?
Yeah, so when you look at raising, renourishing the beach, and there's, cities and counties have budgets for this, there's federal money depending on where you're at and where the budget comes from that. So by piping it in, the intent is to create a higher level of shoreline, so you're expanding your beach, and they're actually taking the sand and putting it out further and further into the water, because you can't just, it won't just stay there if we just pile it up as a dune, right? It has to have the slope, and so the waves are out here, and they're taking, the energy away from sucking the sand, So you've probably seen it right after a major storm, how all of a sudden you walk out there and maybe the seagrass is like up here and there's a whole, 2 or 3 feet of sand missing. So they build that shoreline back up, and that makes it a wider beach. So that's typically what their intent is, and they calculate the amount of sand they need to do that and how wide it'll ultimately be, and then how many years before it's all gone again. And that's really storm driven. So that's one of the things they try to, there's university professors that specialize in sand movement and helping counties understand your sand budget is what they call it.
So how long do they think that new beachfront will last? Do they give you a timeline of 50 years, 100 years?
So I'm not an engineer or sand expert. I just hang out with them
Yeah.
occasionally. But so it's a very short time frame.
Okay.
Because it's really storm driven. So if you have even winter storms that, can churn up, or a couple of dramatic summer storms. Where are the currents going? So we're talking in less than 5 years. So very, particularly in other areas, they're renourishing every 3 to 5 years, and other areas may be more on a short-term budget because you don't want it to get completely eroded and start back from scratch. But that's about the extent of my knowledge. So.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
That's helpful to us.
Okay, you're welcome.
Anything else at this point? Just a little 2 cents. At Volano Beach up at St. Augustine, I guess 2 years ago, I went up there. You go to walk down to the beach, and there is no beach. It's about a 20-foot drop down, and even the houses have no sand under them. So talking to my fellow commissioners over in that area, I guess they went through quite a fiasco getting the beach nourishment back in, went in, put in a huge seawall, built up the sand, put beautiful native grassings. I went back there this year, and it's 50% gone. So 50% of it's there, but now you go out, you get another 50% out before it goes back down. So a lot of it would be the weather. I imagine you go a couple of years without hurricanes, it might last a while. You have a couple of hurricanes in a row. I don't think we'll have that problem here, but we do our own level of beach nourishment. But anyway, I don't want to delay on the beach, so please continue.
No, this is important because this does affect budget, right? Long-term, short-term, and so having an understanding of your water current patterns currently, and the local universities do probabilistic modeling of different kinds of hurricanes, so you can start to understand it down the road what might be an increased impact. Not that it's a predictive and a specific line, but there's ways to learn more about what your future costs might be associated with potential change. But like you said, it all comes down to a couple of big storms. So one of the things we were showing, we had the second Regional Resiliency Leadership Summit in April. So this was really a backgrounding opportunity for elected officials, experts, folks from around the country. We brought in speakers to really talk about the risks that we're facing, what we can do about it, and how to take different approaches. And so the summit information is on there. But one of the great groups that we had was this innovative infrastructure panel, and they really did talk about how to bring in new ideas. This takes multiple actors to create. When you're looking at your public waterfronts, lots of different things going on. How do you get different entities involved, from public and private to even philanthropic? What are the communities really wanting from their waterfronts? And so there was a lot of great conversations about this, and we called it the ingredients for innovation. And so it's just a little short list of different ways of approaching your waterfront to make sure that they're really going to be resilient, that they provide great amenities for the residents to do what you can do, bringing in private sector, that sort of thing. So next screen, please. So one of the core policy activities that we're working on is to create a model ordinance template to support resilient shorelines. Pasco County Commissioner Chair of the TBRPC 2 years ago asked our group, the steering committee and the resilience committee, how high should seawalls be? And we said we need to do some work.
You can mention his name because most of the commissioners up here know him, so if you want to.
So it was a good question. We put together a series of work groups to begin to look at this. What are the real resilience strategies that we should be considering for shorelines? If we make things even more harder, there are additional costs associated with that. So we began to say, how do we talk about resilient shoreline strategies overall? What does that look like? And so we created a model ordinance draft. It's still in play, getting input from engineers. I've had several Pasco County stakeholder input meetings. I welcome the opportunity to come up. We had real estate agents, developers, folks really, wanting to know, what can I build? How do we make this consistent? And so this shoreline ordinance template, which is completely voluntary. It's really a guide for staff at local governments and elected officials to understand what could be a future update to your own documents, and looking at the context of heights. And so we're in process. It will be draft released again this early September, and some guide and information and instruction with that. So next screen, please. So I mentioned, and any questions on that summit, because that also talked about living shorelines, which you guys have probably had a lot of input on, shorelines being more flexible and creating things. So Okay, we'll go from here. So as I mentioned the summit earlier, the coalition itself has grown to 32 local governments. Some of the barrier island communities in the Sarasota County have most recently joined us. That's been pretty exciting. They have some, we have a lot, we're starting to identify different challenges associated with different geographies, right? So in working groups that may make sense going forward. But the coalition also has more than 90 private sector partners. Now, a good number of those are engineering and architecture firms, but also groups that would do a lot of work on restoration, and other aspects of community vulnerability. And the summit we also introduced we had the Future of the Region Awards at the summit as well, and one of your tremendous nonprofit organizations received an award there, so.
They received the award, right?
The award.
So that was Save Crystal River.
Save
Remember I
Crystal
told you all
River.
about
Yeah,
that.
they were great. It was such a delight to recognize them. And also, we celebrated 60-year anniversary for the Regional Planning Council that day. So it's hard to believe we've been around that long. Next screen, please. So one of the initiatives of the Resilience Coalition is to create a regional resilience action plan. And that was in the memorandum of understanding that was signed in 2018. And the action plan really is to define regional priorities for collaboration. And in here, so at the summit, we had some voting, different ways, sticky dot votes, electronics. We've been conducting numerous workshops over the past 2 years to really get input from local governments, staff, and elected officials about what are the things that we need to be looking at. And the plan is completely voluntary. Again, it is really a roadmap and also a way to bring in the expertise of different folks. So at the summit, we voted to take 11 of the priorities that were communicated, and they identified 3 top regional priorities. One of them is to really focus on resilient stormwater management and to look at that, because that's really where the extreme rain events, the coastal flooding, the raising of high tides, and all of this begins to affect us. And how are we going to manage the stormwater? How do we work together, treating real watersheds and connecting them? And then climate change communications, which is really about helping our residents, our businesses understand the risks that they face today, what they may be facing going forward. So it's really important for us to have locally resonant messages, but that are also straightforwardly based on good facts and make sense to them. And so, it takes a lot of time to develop communications messages and understand what different folks need based on where they live. So the region will pull everyone together, and a lot of resources will apply for grants to help fund this, but develop communication resources that county and city staff can use and tweak and adapt for their own work. And we'll get input from what does it mean for the folks in Crystal River or Lecanto, or, and how do people really look at things differently. So the rural aspect to very urban aspects is really important to be sensitive to how people understand the information. So
CJ, if I may.
Yes.
As you go along, so we don't save a bunch of stuff to the end, I just want to interject little
please.
little comments. Wade. First of all, we don't need to back up, but just so that our board is aware, some of you were here, some of you weren't, but I believe we were one of the 8 founding members of the coalition. Citrus County was right out there, you right in the forefront of this. And the other thing that's important to pick up by what CJ just said, because we talk about this all the time, this is all a template. This is all recommendations. There's no requirement of any local government, by virtue of being long, to say you must do this. So what they do is they bring all the experts together, they talk about it, they talk about what everybody else is doing, and then when we get to an issue, then the information is there for us to digest, to say, yeah, we like that, that fits us, no, it doesn't. So again, great group of people, always very collegial to work with, but, Jack is the person from Pasco County that she's talking about, the way Jack is with stuff. And so, again, it's always very straightforward, honest discussion. I don't know if you would, but I also brought up the issue about waterfront setbacks. I took this down to them. And from the engineering perspective, it was more about stormwater management. It really didn't, nobody wanted to get into the what we call water quality, right? We didn't want to get into that. So there's information that'll be coming forward related to stormwater management as far as waterfront setbacks. But so they'll deal with what they deal with, and they leave the other stuff up to the local governments to deal with. So I just want to kind of put the little political arms around that. The other thing, CJ danced around it very nicely, the climate change component. You know, a couple of the commissioners from some counties, when they started talking about climate change, sea level rise, global warming, well, some of the commissioners were like, all you could do to keep them in their chairs, right? So it was a strong effort to keep everybody together. And I think what people have come up with, correct me if I'm wrong, CJ, is that most everyone recognizes there is a degree of climate change. Now, we can argue what's causing it, you know, how drastic it may be, but I think most people believe, you know, by looking at the data, so things are changing, and, you know, either we can deal with it or we can't. And that's kind of the attitude the group down there has taken, you know. So we try to avoid the politics of why. We look with what's going on and deal with that. So just thought I'd plug that in, so, because you know how, you've been there, you've been through all that. You
Yes,
know, so.
yeah, thank you for
Okay.
that background. And
Yeah.
it's really working on these issues, we know that the residents themselves have seen, long-term residents have seen change in weather patterns. And so where it used to rain, you know, 3 o'clock, you know, regularly in the summertime, now, you know, 3 weeks, there's no rain, it's 95 degrees, and then suddenly we're going to have 7 inches in 2 hours. And so these kind of extreme, these variable rain patterns are part of the larger climate change issues. And so folks recognize that, you know, hot is hot, so how do we talk about extreme heat and what that looks like? But there's agricultural impacts too. It gets hotter earlier, and what does that do to crops? Or, you know, so there's a variety of ways to unpack the technical and scientific information to get better prepared or better understand what are the short-term impacts of this thing going to do to us, whether it's an economic piece, and lots of good work going on. So thank you for that background on that, and we really do try to you know, hone in on the benefits of actually acting collectively, working together on this, because there's no boundaries for this bad weather stuff, right? It happens to all of us. So next screen, please. So this is impossible to read. Let me just say that to you, okay? Even if you had a magnifying glass. The point is there's 11 regional priorities. The top level ones that I do want to just call your attention to, which get back to some of this, is that we have come to realize that resilience has a very strongly local component, hyper-local even, because certain neighborhoods, because of their, you know, geography, their land, the things, it's just different. And so Resilient Neighborhood Hub is one of the big ideas we have here about going forward, looking at things from, it's not just a county perspective or a city perspective, but understanding where certain neighborhoods and the people that live there. And by neighborhood, I'm loosely using that. You can call it community area, but the point is it's not one giant span of a county or a city. So the significance of recognizing how different areas may need different kinds of resources or programs and support or infrastructure investment to address the things going on there. We talked about the communications. There's a lot of support, a lot of enthusiasm for construction and land use design. You know, how do we make things, we know we're going to keep building. The type of buildings we have, where we put them, the kind of strategies that we ask the developers to do that elevate or ensure that the rain drains on the location rather than creating more stormwater runoff for you to spend more money on down the road, right, literally and figuratively. So the idea is, how do we pull this regional land use and design working group together? What are the important things and questions that you have that you would like to see there? Regional coordination with new housing, affordable housing. Issues and priorities are across the region, top goals for everyone. So we'll be looking at the connection between resiliency of existing affordable homes, and I'll show you some things at the end here about housing and our project we do with that, and new housing that is affordable at a range of levels of affordability, and how resilient and energy efficient that needs to be. Because as we talked about heat and the extreme things, so there's a lot of enthusiasm for that. Other aspects of habitat, restoration, regional transportation was the top third goal, which I didn't really bring up. And that's going to take a lot of work because there's so many partners working on that, so many agencies and initiatives. But electric vehicle charging stations in different counties. So again, the point of the regional plan is not that everyone has to work on everything, but that, for example, for those of you who may serve on transportation or your housing advisory committees are interested in how are we going to do resilient housing? What are the things that your group is working on? How can we contribute to your knowledge and you contribute to our knowledge about what are the priorities and standards that you think are important? So that's the idea, is that it's kind of a menu. And not even a roadmap, I'm going to say a menu that different leadership can get involved with under different components. Next screen, please. So if I may, I'm going to shift gears a little bit to our Resilient Affordable Housing Initiative, which is called REACH, and that stands for Resilience and Energy Assessment of Communities and Housing. The RPC was approached by JP Morgan Chase Foundation after a county grant that we had worked on with Manatee County that was starting to look at how are we understanding the kinds of flood risks to different kinds of housing. And what I learned and what we learned from that study was that everyone was measuring it in a different way. One university measured it one way, the county was looking at it one way, the other university, other counties. And so we said, let's try to standardize how we, in the region, evaluate different types of housing and their flood risks. And so the REACH program was created with this grant. It's now wrapping up. All the reports are due. You'll see a lot of the resources are there, but we've had a lot of participation with regional and local and university experts to talk about this and to create the resources which actually now enable us to come out and do really useful work, to sit down with staff here and other folks to convene and discuss your specific flood housing component. So the REACH program had a workshop May 6th. About 130 folks were there, and it ranged from the elected leader panel of certain county housing authorities to, at the end, a panel with developers of affordable housing, talking about what they would do or could do or were doing. And it was really interesting to see a range of, one developer said, we can't do that because it's not affordable and our profit. And then the next developer said, we're doing that exact same thing, And so to see, to hear from their own, and it was in partnership with the Urban Land Institute, which has a lot of developer members and builders as their base. So we're really trying to work with, to understand what they are interested, willing to do, what are best practices around the state, around the country, to bring in exciting new designs and really go from there. Next screen, please.
CJ, one
Sir?
more interruption.
Yep.
We just had this discussion.
Did you? Okay.
We did about what government can do in regards to affordable housing, and we kind of left with a consensus of we didn't want to interfere with the private sector, but there's things government can do to work with the private sector. And this panel that CJ's talking about was really amazing, because instead of sitting up here and saying what can the developers do, it's great to have the developers at the table saying, well, you want us to do it and you want it to be profitable for us, this is what it takes. So these are the kind of panels that it's, and I'm just saying this as a commercial, I won't be here next year, but I encourage all my colleagues up here that'll be here to attend these kind of panels and discussions in the future, because it's like anything else. If you hear 10 things, you might hear one thing that's brilliant that you can bring home and put into place. So I just, little commercial break there for you, CJ. Plug it.
So and we know it's challenging to drive to get to places. So if the timing doesn't work for you all, staff is very happy to coordinate and work with you to do things locally, because then you have more of your own stakeholders here, right? And we recognize that where we hold meetings brings in different people. And so if we can be a part of that going forward, we really would welcome that. So one of the wonky tools, and I'm just, the usual flood map picture here, is we have, as a part of this project, created a very specific mapping tool for the planning team, for the emergency team, land use, GIS staff, to understand exactly where the affordable housing is located in terms of different kinds of risk. And it is, super easy to click on a few screens and start seeing like, oh, there's the dots. And so when you see this one where the blue dot and is a little bit higher and darker things, so we've got this. This is the overview of, it matches exactly the state's vulnerability assessment parameters. So when it says compound flooding, looking at the requirements, it also allows you to go in and say, what is this building here? What is this dot exactly that I see here? And you can pull it up. It has the name of the building, the year built, the mortgage expiration date, the type of families, the units that are in there. And so it basically gives you a sense of who's in this building and what's going to happen to this building over time. So we wanted to start making some of this data easier to use. And this was data and the map we just have received these updated stuff this week. So I wanted to put this in here in the presentation, which may be newer than the presentation we submitted to you guys last week. So next screen, please. So this is just a snapshot. It's hard to see, but this is the entire region. So you guys are up at the top, right? And what we're doing is looking at all residential parcels. And there's about 1.89 million residential units. And then we can look at this across a variety of different types of housing. So publicly subsidized, affordable market rate, and that can be variable depending on your average area median income. And then mobile home parcels, right? So it's just a snapshot to show you the different ways of how the data can get clustered. And it's not meant for you to analyze this, but just so you can see, the second from the left is really where the publicly assisted are. And then you can look at, well, where are other types of housing that are affordable? And then you can look at mobile homes in its own different way, because that's also a different and subcategory of housing, right? So I just wanted to show you the power of the data that we're pulling out, not that you have to become experts in any of this. Next screen, please.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
We didn't have the last two slides, so could you make sure that
We will
I
print
get
that out, yes.
Yeah,
I
the
just,
last one, this one, and anything that's coming, we don't have.
A lot of that just came in last night. She updated it, so, and again, this is always available on the TBRPC's website, right? So you
Correct.
can always go at any time and gather this, but I know you'll send us the update.
we will get you the update, yeah. I thought it would
Well,
be.
that's why I looked at Doug, not you. 'cause
Yeah,
I
no,
figured
yeah, it was because the previous images were generic, and I thought that wouldn't be terribly useful for you, and we just received the final information from UF. So,
Thank you.
integrating that into it. But just again, to show you that you can look at the different housing subcategories and pull this out. And what we're looking at is how flood risks change over time. So the left little screen basically shows you current timeframes. The far right shows you 2070. And so this is the importance. So you can look at 2020, 2040, 2070, and start to see what more is at risk. And the real important question is where we start to say, well, if we keep allowing certain kind of building or certain kind of housing in really high-risk areas, this number is actually going to go up. This is the snapshot of 2040 as of today. If we just keep doing things the way we're doing, that picture will get bigger and, more risk will happen. So again, just a note on the importance of mobile homes and manufactured homes, and as these are very significant part of housing resources and subtypes, right? But we know that they're not very sturdy for hurricanes when they're inland, and the need for that. So this is a sub-factor that you could, have just even a workshop on that. What do we do? How do we help citizens, or do we not, right? And so there's some questions to be addressed further down the road, and as we look at that. And of all of the counties, as a proportionate amount of your housing, mobile homes, you're one of the largest counties with mobile homes in that regard. So next screen, please. So again, just another snapshot of the data. We can look at things behind the scenes from how are king tides plus sea level rise going to tie this in. This purple imagery where you see kind of a light purple and a dark purple, that is ways of layering on looking at 2040 flood risk and 2070 flood risk. And so it's just a way to see, like, where are things going? When you look at those individual building dots, those are your multifamily housing units, you're like, oh, it's not so bad. But then you see the roads around it, and you're like, that's not too good. And this is permanent inundation. This isn't just a storm surge coming in for a Cat 2. So we just wanted to show you the power of the tools we have, the ability to collaborate with staff to prepare reports and provide whatever background, whatever questions you have, we're happy to work on these with you. So next screen, that's it. So
Can I,
wanted
one
to
more
end with-
comment, well, and then I
Yeah.
want you to do your wrap, but a great point is Tampa International Airport came over and was very interested in this work, because obviously Tampa International Airport is on Tampa Bay. And they're very interested about airport expansion, how that should be done, how, what that's going to look like in 2070, where should any new development, and also I'll talk a bit about Central Command. You've done a lot with McDill. You want to touch on that just to kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. And just the last screen on here was just a list of the resources of affordable housing located on our website, and I think that's the final one, if you click one more on that, Doug. And we thank you for your time. So the McDill, it's a military installation resilience plan, and all of the military installations around the country are really looking at this and funded by DoD. So it's serious. How are the operations, the continuity, the resources? I mean, whether you need to move planes, whether we need to build better shoreline wave protection, electricity, power hardening. And in this particular case, what is the potential impact to the thousands of employees? Where do they live? If they can't get to work, the whole thing is, the building may be okay, but if the people are at risk, what's really at stake for continuity of operations for so many different important operations? So it's a great model. Kara, who you perhaps have seen, Kara Sarah, is working on it. She's our comprehensive resilience planner leading that initiative. So we're excited to be a part of it. And the base resiliency planner, Tony Rodriguez, is involved in a lot of our other things with the city of Tampa and Hillsborough. So there's a lot of cross-information sharing on that. So.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions, comments? Yes, Commissioner Slabaugh.
I just think it's too bad that I don't think there's anybody from our housing, our Maricela. We need to make sure we get that to them, because there's a lot of information in here. And she might already know it, but I think we should take advantage of that.
I think they've been involved in they reach out to Citrus County like they do other counties. And again, the TBRPC is a resource for us. So they're a phone call away, and as you heard CJ said, if our housing people we want to have a workshop and discuss this, they're happy to come up and conduct these meetings here to do that type of thing too. So.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you. I learned a lot, and I appreciate that. I always love to learn something new. So
Great. Well, thank you for your time and your questions this morning. I
Sure.
appreciate
Commissioner
it.
Davis, you had something?
Yes, I was wondering if SwiftMud is one of the contributors to the partnership.
SwiftMud is actually a gubernatorial appointee to the Regional Planning Council. They've not been very active most recently. We're waiting for appointees, but our Resilience Steering Committee co-chair is Councilmember Pete Altman. He is Newport Richie's council member. One of his initiatives on being made co-chair was to immediately reach out to SwiftMud and say, how do we work more effectively with you? How do we get more input? And so we've had a number of, just since this February, really a number of phone calls to talk to them about what are they going to be funding, what are their priorities on this, looking at water quality, where are their strategies going. So the plan is to get more connected with them going forward.
Well, the reason I ask is we are basically the southernmost part, there's a little bit in Hernando, of the whole swath of spring-fed. We are the aquifer land, and we have so many we have more first magnitude springs in this county than any of the other counties. And so our nature coast is all about spring-fed rivers. And so if our aquifer is not kept as full as possible, we have saltwater intrusion is going to be a bigger and bigger issue with sea level rise. And so it seems to me like looking decades down the road that SWIFMUD really needs to be coming to the table on aquifer management in particular. How much we're drawing from the aquifer as the population is going up, as we're, right now we're bursting at the aquifer's bursting full right now. But not too long ago, we had a major storm come in and the aquifer was low at the time, and we had saltwater intrusion, which killed everything in Crystal River, and we're spending millions and millions of dollars to replant all the eelgrass. So that'll wipe out a lot of stuff if we don't keep that aquifer healthy through droughts.
Well, thank you for raising that topic. Groundwater, aquifer, drinking water, intrusion, super important. And you're the second person in 1 week to mention this to me as a potential regional dialogue and discussion and understanding that. So are you leading one of the committees or?
I am chair of the Tourism Development Council. So, without manatees, we're in big trouble. But I also grew up on Crystal River, and so I remember the last time I went free diving in the springs and Three Sisters, I'm like, what in the world's going on? There's this big sand cloud. Literally, in all the years I've been swimming in those springs, I've never seen the push of water that strong that there was a cloud of sand. Like Old Faithful, it was geysering up out of so it is really strong right now, but the more that aquifer pushes water out, the more we're pushing salt water out of everything, and that balance is really critical.
I appreciate you bringing this up.
Yeah, and SwiftMud is, I really wish we could get a handle on pulls from the aquifer that are not permitted. That would be a big goal of mine.
I'm taking notes.
Anything else? Commissioner Kennard, any comments, thoughts, questions?
Just a great presentation. Thank you for coming up and filling in and bringing us some good information this morning.
Well, yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. I don't have the gravitas of Sean. I tend to, as Commissioner knows, get more focused on certain things, but thank you for your interest in that, and we look forward to working with you or seeing you again.
Don't run anywhere. We still had some talking to do. Commissioner Carnahan, anything?
Great presentation. We appreciate y'all and everything you do, so thank you.
Yeah, CJ, again, I kind of feel I'm used to your presentations. I mean, usually we can sit there and listen. And when you go to the TBRPC, this is what we do when we're down there. We're here, these kind of presentations, and then the follow-ups. Just a couple comments, and this is broad. I know you can't cover it all, but just think about this, commissioners. The statistic you showed us of the 6 counties in the TBRPC, percentage-wise, we have the highest rating of mobile homes, right?
Second highest.
Second highest,
Yeah.
okay. So, in any kind of evacuation, my understanding is that includes mobile homes. So even if it's a voluntary evacuation of a coastal area because of a hurricane, that means technically all mobile homes. That was my understanding of the way that worked. So you think about that, you're looking at the potential for who would have to evacuate, yet when they talk about affordable housing, the first thing they bring up is mobile homes, right? So now you're saying, well, we use mobile homes for affordable housing, but if there's any kind of storm event, those are the first people that have to leave their homes and go someplace else. So the other thought that came up that I saw at this presentation, waterfront is typically more susceptible to storm events, right? And that's where the well-to-do folks live. Usually the people in affordable housing live on the high and dry, right? They're more inland and higher. So there's this, you're looking at all these different things that interface, and you sit there and you listen to developers talk and stuff like that. So as of now, the more affordable land for building is inland, right? Because most people want to live on the water or whatever. So there's just all these things that, and as you know, we've sat up here enough, we know one decision made over here affects 25 someplace else and how these all come together. 2 other things to bring up. I love I can't remember, you know who I'm talking about, the gentleman in charge of resiliency at McDill.
Tony.
Excuse me?
Tony Rodriguez.
Yes, Tony. So Tony made the profound statement, I've shared these with these commissioners and I do with everybody else, how you define resiliency in an elevator speech. And that was, he said, the U.S. Central Command is located at McDill Air Force Base. The U.S. Central Command cannot shut down because of a weather event. Okay, that's all you got to remember from that. And you touched on, okay, well, the building might be there, but how do the people get there? How do they leave? How do the employees come? So there is, we plan for all these contingencies, but sometimes people don't think about weather-related events. And the other one that our commissioners should keep in mind, as I know they do, but just to keep out there, TBRPC did a business recovery from storm study. And basically, this is a state, if not nationwide, if businesses shut down after a hurricane, just to put it in context, if a Category 3 or above or whatever hit Crystal River, Inverness, or Homosassa or whatever, and wiped out all the businesses there, okay, 50% of them would never come back. So you're looking at a tremendous impact from that economic aspect. Plus, I forget the number, but the most valuable, a huge portion of Citrus County's tax roll is on the water. Okay, so we're looking at that too. So it's when we talk about resiliency and the rules and all these other things that come into play, those are the kind of things that I've learned at the TBRPC about. When people say, well, I don't care about that, well, you should, and this is why. So I'm using this as my stump speech, CJ, to remind my colleagues I won't be there next year. By the time I leave, I'm going to make some recommendations on the commissioners. I think that should be highly involved with you all down there. But you can see this is something that's almost like a full-time position working with the TBRPC down there in what they're doing or whatever. So thank you. Thanks, Sean. And again, I know you're only phone, we can have you come up, and if the commissioners in the future want to do more with, affordable housing, resilience or whatever, I know we'll reach out to you and have you do that as well as our staff. So.
Well, thank you so much for your leadership. It's been great. And yes, hurricane season, business resiliency it's a, I hate to say it, but it's a hot topic. We can still get out and have conversations, webinars, and provide input and do things. And the big takeaway on that is the difference between the business property owner and the tenant. And so when you think about disaster preparedness and who owns the buildings and what they can do to make the tenants and the small business is inside those. So there's different strategies we need, and we're happy to come back and talk anytime. So thank you for having us, and appreciate that, and look forward to answering any questions, email, or connecting with staff and all of that. So thanks for your time and your leadership.
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll see you in August, I guess.
See you
Not
in
in July,
August.
see you in
All right.
August. Commissioners, any final comments, thoughts, anything from here so far?
Yeah, good discussion.
Yeah. Anything from staff, any comments, thoughts? Okay. Good, okay, well, as informational gathering, that's what we have. That usually we have these workshops and to help us answer questions, and I don't know about you, but usually I leave with 10 more questions than I had before we started, but that's what it's all about, is gaining information. So, CJ, just so you know, we haven't had a chance to meet, but please go back and tell the TBRPC that we have reached out, and we're looking for the governor to appoint a gubernatorial appointee from Citrus County to the TBRPC. I believe that gentleman has applied. Our board has voted to send a letter to the governor to endorse that. So hopefully you'll be hearing from the governor's appointment office pretty soon about that. So just so you got that. Okay? Commissioners, nothing else from that. We'll go to our last segment of open to the public. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak to the board about anything they heard at the workshop today or anything in general? Okay, see nothing from the public, so we will close open to the public. Again, our next meeting is coming up today at 1 o'clock, which will be our regular meeting, so we will adjourn this workshop. Thank you all very much.